Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. Today we are here to present the Whiteshell closure project overview and status update, and that will be presented momentarily by Mitch McKay, and we'll go through introductions of with him in just a second. But before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge that we are presenting our project and our presentation from the ancestral lands of Treaty 1 and Treaty 3, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation in Manitoba. I would like to now, turn it over to Mitch McKay.
Okay, thank you, Keith. I'm Mitch McKay. I'm the manager of Environmental Remediation Management Project Division, which is a communications team that is in charge of all the communications around all of CNL's decommissioning and environmental remediation projects. So, including this here in the lovely part of Manitoba where the Whiteshell Laboratories exist. There's a few things I would like to point out before I get started. Towards the bottom of the screen there, if you're not familiar with the Zoom platform, at the bottom you'll see several buttons. One of them is the QA function. So today we'll be fielding questions via typing into that QA function. So if you just click on it, you'll be able to type your question in, and then at the end of the presentation, Keith will then ask the questions. The other function down there is an interpretation button. So this presentation is available in both French and English. So if you press that interpretation button, that will toggle you through either a French version or an English version. And then finally, I would like to point out that we are recording this session. So this will be available on our YouTube page shortly after it's completed, usually about a day or so. So that, you know, if you want to go back and look at it or provide a link to someone who didn't have a chance to attend, by all means. Okay, so I see we have roughly 24 attendees. So thank you very much for spending some time with us today. It's been a while since we've been out because of the pandemic, talking about the Whiteshell closure project. So this is a very high level presentation that will give you an overview and a status update. And then towards the end, we'll talk about the closure, and as we move into closure, the end state next land use. So just some preliminary slides on that. So happy to begin an update on the closure project. So next slide. This is just a quick reminder of the mission that we're on here. One of CNL's missions is to restore and protect the environment. One way that CNL fulfills that mission is by reducing Canada's nuclear liabilities, including the waste and contaminated buildings and other infrastructure. CNL's safe decommissioning of the Whiteshell Laboratories site will help restore and protect the environment and fulfill that mission. The ultimate goal here at Whiteshell is decommission is to clean up the land as much as possible and to reach what we call an end state. Next slide, please. So to reach that end state, obviously, lots of work has to be done. For those who are familiar with the Whiteshell site, this might be a recognizable picture. This is an aerial of the site. As you can see, in the top left-hand corner there is the Winnipeg River. And the main campus, sort of as your eye flows up off the top there, and the big brown building kind of in the middle, or close to the middle, is the WR1 reactor. To, as they call the south side here, which is towards the bottom of your page, and you kind of see buildings highlighted in a light green or an aqua green. That's the non-nuclear side. And then up kind of where we are today, here at the Whiteshell site, we're just kind of across from, if you see the parking lot there, that's where I'm sitting here today at the Whiteshell site. So this obviously is, as mentioned, is a full closure project, a full environmental remediation and decommissioning project. And since about 2015, which is kind of the measuring stick of when the GOCO contract started, the government-owned contractor operated, we've cleared about 18,512 meters cubed or squared of our main campus footprint. That translates to roughly about 27 buildings that have come down, and about 7,500 meters squared of material that has been safely sorted and either disposed or managed properly, depending on the waste category. So as we move through this presentation, I'll highlight some of the projects that are being undertaken from that aerial there. So some of you may be familiar on the line with Building 402. Building 402 was the former medical services building, and in the basement, you may recall there was an accelerator. This was mainly a research facility. And then towards its later years, it did have the environmental protection team in it and some of our regulatory affairs staff. So this building is being prepared for demolition. This is kind of the next building in line on site to come down. And then if we look to the side here, the south side services building. So if you remember from the aerial where the kind of aquamarine looking squares were, this was the non-nuclear side. And over the last several years, all the underground services have been remediated and underground structures have been removed from the ground, as well as some of the buildings. So some may recall the shipping and receiving building was on this side. I believe at one time there was a cafeteria and the engineering facility. All those buildings have been come down, and most of this side is now fully decommissioned. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is the Building 200 demolition, one of the more complicated buildings on site, and it's nearing completion. It was complicated because it was an extremely contaminated building. As some may recall, this building was the active liquid waste treatment facility. And when we say active liquid, that means the radioactive liquid. So back when the site was operational, this is where all the active liquid would have come into. So as you can imagine, a complicated building to tear down, but it was well characterized, everything done safely and self-performed here on site by our staff. And they used a lot of fixatives to contain the contaminants, and then allow for the sorting of the different waste categories. So the low level and mostly low level and intermediate level waste sorted and put into its respective categories and managed going forward. So lots of progress on this building, and like I said, it's very, very close to being completed. And a lot of staff obviously here on site self-performed So taking a lot of the learnings from this building and being able to apply it to other buildings across the site. So we can move to the next slide. So as mentioned off the top, the building 402 is probably the next building that's going to come down here on site. The former health sciences building. And actually off the corner of that building, you can see, if you look to the right, where the RD14 building used to be, which was the experimental loop here on site. And that was decommissioned about 3 or 4 years ago as well. And then my former office over in building 405 here, which is the picture on the right, is the former library building, which is now the staff lunchroom with some offices in the front there. That building is also slated to come down in the very, very near future. So lots of activity here over the next year. Building 412, which is now kind of a mixed building. The engineering staff are out of here now, as well as the stores and the machine shops. So for those of you who have been on site, you may remember touring this building. It has all the different machines and tooling that would have been required when the site was mainly operational and making different tools and moving different things around. So that building is slated to come down very shortly. I know that for those that may not be aware, that Whiteshell has an asset donation program going. And it's in collaboration with Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. So that's taking some of the assets that are no longer needed or being used at the site and donating it back to charitable or municipalities in the region. And I know that some of the stuff out of the machine shop has been donated, and they are looking for some homes for some stuff as well that's coming out of that building. So stay tuned for updates on that sort of equipment in our upcoming edition of our community newsletter, Contact. And then over on the right here, oh, sorry, go back there, Rachel, is building 911. This is the former steam generator building, shut down several years ago, and actually the oil tanks in the back were remediated several years ago as well, and has kind of served as the backup diesel generator for the entire site since then. As you may recall in past updates to the community, the Whiteshell site converted to electricity several years ago and some propane. And so really reducing our carbon footprint. And so each sort of building is self-sustaining on their own electric or propane heat. However, they're backed up by this diesel generator in building 911. With that backup now slated to be decommissioned, each building will now be getting their own backup pending the timing of the decommissioning of the facility. So the building 911 will be coming down in the next year or so. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, a waste management area update. So I know in the aerial we didn't see it, but if you follow the road down to your right off that aerial picture off the start, you do eventually get to our waste management area, where all of the resulting radioactive waste is managed at the Whiteshell site. And right now, that area has gone through several upgrades over the last several years to prepare itself to really clean up the area, sort it, segregate it, properly characterize it, and put everything into modern storage. One of the big projects over the last year was the low-level waste bunker waste removal project. So in the waste area, there are I guess you would call them. They almost look like big trailer bunks that are made out of concrete, and within those, they stored low-level radioactive waste. Now, low-level radioactive waste is like used equipment that's been contaminated by radioactivity, paper, cabling, perhaps some PPE like clothing, decommissioned parts, even cleaning supplies like mops. So within that bunker, the team there went in, characterized, took all the material out, resorted it, packaged it into modern packaging, and getting it ready for its final resting place, which will be shipped probably to Chalk River for eventual storage in the proposed disposal in the proposed near surface disposal facility. Now, the standpipes and bunkers waste retrieval system is one of the more interesting projects out at the waste management area. An engineering project where a lot of remote tooling is being created, unique one of a kind remote tooling that will help remediate the standpipes and bunkers, which will essentially do the same thing that the low-level waste bunkers did, except it won't be, obviously it'll be a human behind a computer rather than a human going in and retrieving stuff. So a lot of robots, a lot of computer-based cleaning up and characterizing, and then putting into modern management and storage. So the last picture there on the right is the concrete canister storage facility. This is all the used reactor fuel that is on the Whiteshell site, and it's stored in these concrete canisters. So they for this project, they've reconditioned and tested the flasks that will move the fuel out of these. They've stuck cameras down into those canisters to do a visual inspection. So they basically done all the preparatory work. And at some point, the mandate is to fully decommission these and to move the fuel off-site to the Chalk River site where new canisters have been built. So we can move to the next slide, which I believe is more pictures of the standpipes and bunker waste retrieval system. So as I mentioned, it's this is a almost fully automated system that's being created. Right now, it's being created in a warehouse in the GTA region in Ontario, where they're testing it and putting this together, this facility that will then come in parts and be put back together in the waste management area here at the Whiteshell site to be used to remediate the bunkers and the standpipes. And certainly, as we progress this project, we'll have more updates and lots of great visuals on the work that's being done by staff here at Whiteshell. All right, Rachel. Okay, I wanted to give a brief update on the WR1 Environmental Assessment. Obviously, WR1 has been out in the community quite a lot over the last several years, talking about their plan for in situ decommissioning of the Whiteshell Reactor 1 and their mission to complete environmental impact statement. And we know that right now, CNL is addressing responses to comments on the draft EIS and preparing supplemental studies. So right around where that blue box is on the current stage. So we're incorporating Indigenous and public feedback. We're addressing requests from the regulator so that the hope is we can submit an updated draft EIS slightly before the Christmas. And then the project is hoping to be out again in the community following that resubmission in the January, February timeline. So we'll be out providing a more fulsome update at that point. But at this moment, just wanted to provide this brief slide on where the WR1 project is in the regulatory timeline and let you know that the project will come out with a more fulsome update in the new year. So next slide. Thanks, Rachel. And then I know I've talked about a lot of this stuff over the last several slides, but just wanted to give a bit of a time frame on when things are tentatively set to sort of be completed. So as you can see, this gives a very high level overview of when certain activities on site are anticipated to be completed, and gives you that sort of end date somewhere around 2027 when they hope to have the entire site decommissioned and remediated. But as I've mentioned, over the next several years, well, next couple of years into 2022, the main campus will come down. Some of the buildings that have already been mentioned in the presentation. The low-level waste, trenches and bunkers remediated into 2022 as well. WR1 out to 2026, pending obviously the environmental impact statement. And then you saw all that great work that was being done in terms of remote tooling for the standpipes and bunker waste retrieval, which gets us out to 2026. One of the more prominent buildings on site is the hot cells building. So this was for those not familiar, was a building that was used to manipulate nuclear materials in giant concrete structures with remote tooling. That building is set by 2024. And then obviously out into 2027 when the full restoration of the site is completed. So Rachel, if you want to go to the next slide. So I know with the pandemic, community engagement has been a little more difficult. We have been doing some WR1 webinars. And we hope that as things, cross our fingers, open up some more, we're able to get out into the community over the next several months as well. We have continued to be engaged with our Indigenous communities as well. Our First Nations and Métis have been participating in our environmental monitoring program. And we have set up a new Indigenous Advisory Committee which kicked off its first meeting at the start of this month, September. So we're hoping to have another meeting in the very near future on that. Also upcoming things that aren't mentioned on here, our public liaison committee is also meeting, I think, in either October or November. And a new issue of our contact newsletter will be going out in the next couple months as well. So stay tuned for that, which will probably provide some more updates. Next slide, Rachel. Okay, so preparing for the final cleanup of the Whiteshell laboratory site. So as many of you know, perhaps know, the Whiteshell site from that aerial only used a small portion of the entire site was built up. The majority of the site remains remains untouched and would meet what they would call agricultural land use and doesn't require any remediation. So the bulk of the remediation is kind of in this aerial here, the south side, which is the non-nuclear, and then, you know, over to that brown building, which is WR1 and is the nuclear building, is the reactor building. Over the next several months, we would like to engage the public on the potential future land uses and the associated cleanup criteria to ensure we remediate the site in the best way possible. The Whiteshell licensed area is about, you know, just over 10,000 acres. This is a mixed use land ranging from agricultural, mixed forest, boreal forest, as well as you can see in this area, the impacted areas, lands that were developed to utilize the nuclear mission at site and support, and then the other supporting areas like the waste management area that supported that mission, and the south side here that supported that mission. Of that 10,000 acres, approximately 3,000 of the license area is classified as land which was not used or impacted. So, or sorry, 3,000 hectares. So about 70% of the 10,000 acres is unimpacted during the 60 years of the nuclear operation in this region. This has been verified through detailed airborne and ground radiological survey that was conducted in 2000 as part of the comprehensive study report. And so the main cleanup area obviously impacted, but the key message here is that the majority of the site is unimpacted. So you may remember, maybe you attended back in the summer of 2018 or 2019. We had a public open house here right on site where we talked about all the different activities on site and the cleanup and closure of the Whiteshell closure project. We at that had a survey that was conducted of this. There was about 400 attendees that came to the open house, and about I think it was somewhere 170 filled out the survey, and it just helps give us a bit of a baseline as we start to move into the questions around end state and next land use at the Whiteshell site. So just for you know, this survey obviously unscientific, but just to sort of give a flavor of the things that we heard at this engagement, I'd like to share a bit of the feedback we got from that open house. So next slide. So we asked the question, what factors are important to you as the Whiteshell site is decommissioned and remediated? Obviously, the top one was environmental factors. So making sure that what is left behind does protect human health and safety, and making sure that we have the right monitoring and surveillance in place, and that the institution controls signage, fencing, and all that is all correctly done. So environmental factors, most important at that public open house. Social consideration. So, oh, sorry. so the second place. So these are things like cultural, you know, next uses of the site, like would be would help the community, would maybe recognize some of the work that was done here, and make sure that there's a lasting legacy that has a positive effect on the social well-being of the communities that surround the site. And then the third most important thing to people at that open house was financial or economic factors. So obviously the jobs, that the site represents for this regions is very important. The economic spin-offs, the financials, very important, and an important thing to consider as we try to close the site. Go to the next slide now, Rachel. Thank you. So the next question, we asked a number of questions, but the next question that I picked out was, once the site is closed, what sort of activity do you envision? So what sort of activity do you envision that the site may be able to support? Obviously, number one there was 63 was ongoing nuclear activities, and this is closely tied, obviously, to the economic on the last slide. You know, making sure that the legacy that this site, obviously, the important work that was done here, and the heritage of the work continues into the future with additional nuclear activities. So that was important as an activity that people were envisioning for the site going forward. Next was obviously some sort of economic development in other sectors. So looking for something that could, you know, take up maybe some of the loss of the site and replace it. A nature reserve, historical recognition, shared space, public park, all things where the site could be continued to be accessed or would be able to be accessed by the public in some way and shared. So, you know, those last sort of four are kind of in the same area. So you could probably couple them together and beat the other two as you know, recognition, obviously, of the history here, and then a shared space to maybe do something as a community. So very interesting stuff for us to kind of use as a baseline as we move this conversation forward with the public in the region. Next slide, please, Rachel. So hopefully, beginning this fall, CNL will begin inviting members of the public to tell us more about their ideas on the potential future uses of the land. For example, like we mentioned in the past slides, do we envision a nature reserve? Do we see a need for industrial lands? These are specific discussions we hope to dive into and to get out in the community and talk about. CNL is required to be responsible for proposing site-specific release and cleanup criteria and obtaining the appropriate approvals for that. And as part of that, that's engaging with the public and understanding. It's also engaging with the Indigenous communities as well, which we are doing in tandem. So, confirming what the community thinks, and I do encourage you to watch for upcoming opportunities in the fall and winter, where we will really start to carry out this conversation. Next slide, please. All right. Well, hopefully that's spurred some questions, and Keith, between Keith and I, we can try our best to answer them, or if we're not able to answer them at this particular time, we'll definitely commit to getting back to everyone in writing.
Thank you, Mitch. We do have a number of questions that have come from the public, and I will just read them out to you right now. The first question: why are non-contaminated buildings being decommissioned? Can they not be used for potential projects?
Oh, so that's an excellent question, and I think one that has certainly come up in sort of the economic generation side of things as well in the past. I know that the mission here is to fully and completely decommission the site and the liabilities here on site. Many of the facilities are coming to kind of their end life, their design structure. And many of the services are shared across the site, so very difficult to sometimes isolate without having to do a lot of re-engineering. I know that that it has been possible to sort of work with both CNL and Atomic Energy Canada Limited to look at other uses, and some of that work has been done. Just not sure where some of that stuff ended up. However, it is important to note that the mission is to take down the buildings here, to clean up the site and to remove the liabilities at this time. If there is something presented at some point that could change that, I'm sure other parties would definitely try to look to see if something could be done.
Thank you, Mitch. Another question which reads, I assume full closure for the site means that eventually it will be abandoned. What are the criteria that need to be met for the site to be abandoned? Note, if CNL or AECL has no plans to abandon the site, then the hazards at the site will need to be safely stored in perpetuity, and the site can never be closed.
So thank you for that question. I'll try my best, but we may have to get back to you on this one as well. At this time, I don't believe, so I think it's the second part of your answer to your own question there. There's at this point, CNL or Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, who owns the site, does not have plans to abandon the site. The site is licensed by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And so the license will stay on this site, and the license will need to be maintained as long as the regulator is there's materials here to be regulated. So that's my best answer to that question. At which point where you can demonstrate to the regulator that the license is no longer needed, then I guess that would be the point when you would be able to so-called abandon the site. However, I don't think in the near or even the further future that is something that's under consideration. I know that we're working with Indigenous communities and local communities on environmental monitoring and follow-up monitoring. And obviously will also be dependent on the outcome of the WR1 EIS. But you know what? I'm going to commit to get a more fulsome answer to that. A person who has better technical expertise in that area. And so we'll commit to answering that question as well via writing. Just to clarify, to make sure I've got things right.
Thank you, Mitch. We do have one more question. Is the removal of waste from standpipes and bunkers not dependent on approval and operation of the NSDF at Chalk River Labs? Will it be ready to receive Whiteshell Laboratories waste by 2026 or sooner?
So it's not dependent on the approval and operation of the NSDF. The Chalk River site is licensed to waste management area to manage the waste from the Whiteshell site, and that low-level waste I think some of it, as well as some ILW waste, is already being managed there. However, if approval and operation of the NSDF does come in, obviously the low-level waste, if it meets the criteria, and if it meets our commitments as well to Indigenous communities and the communities in the Chalk River region, will be disposed of in the near surface disposal facility.
Thank you, Mitch. And other questions come in. Can CNL or Whiteshell Laboratories provide an update on anticipated projects that they may need support on?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I'll ask Keith to take note of that. And that's a good webinar topic, perhaps for our next webinar. We're going to try to do a Whiteshell webinar at least every month. So that would be a nice topic for one of the ones coming up. So thank you for that suggestion. And if you have any further suggestions on topics you're interested in, please do send us a note.
Thank you, Mitch. Another question, where did the library contents move to?
That's a good question. I would assume most of it probably went to Chalk River. That was before my time here at Whiteshell when that was moved out. But I imagine some of it was digitized perhaps and stored in our digital archives. And then some of it was moved to the Chalk River library as well. But I'm not sure on that one. So again, I'll commit to getting back to them on that as well.
Other questions come in. If WR1 remains in situ, what is AECL's or CNL's plan to manage it following site decommissioning?
So I think that's a good question, and I would probably have to come back to that one in terms of in writing. I know that the WR1 will require an environmental assess or environmental monitoring follow-up program. So if in situ is approved, that program will need to be managed into the future, as that will continue to be a licensed site. But I'll have to commit to get back to that one too.
Thank you, Mitch. Another question has come in. There is somebody who is looking for an update on the WR1 EOI project.
Is that the EIS? Look at the, I know our industry has tons of acronyms, and sometimes even I get stumped. The environmental oversight.
That's not what I'm familiar with.
Oh, expressions of interest. Oh, I see. Okay. We will have to get back on that one as well. They will have to ask the procurement staff. That's a good update, though, as part of the previous topic that was asked.
Okay.
So the RFP. Okay, I see. The RFP came out last year. Okay, well, we'll commit to we'll ask the procurement staff here at Whiteshell to provide an answer on that one as well. Thank you for that.
At this point, that is the end of the questioning that has come through on our question and answer portion of our program. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank Mitch for his presentation and update on the Whiteshell Laboratories closure project, and for providing answers to the questions that have come through. We do have the ability to receive questions at ermcommunications@cnl.ca. If you have some questions that you haven't asked yet, but that come to mind afterwards that you'd like an answer to. We will be, as Mitch mentioned, having this webinar available on CNL's website for future viewing if it is something that you wish to do, or you wish to pass this on to others for their viewing pleasure. With that in mind, we'll close it off for today, and I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and your participation, and we look forward to engaging with you further in a future webinar in upcoming months.